Alright, let's dive into something that's been on my mind lately. The Toronto Maple Leafs and their AHL affiliates, the Marlies. Now, we all know the Leafs have their fair share of star power. But what about those guys in the shadows, the ones who could step up when injuries strike? And let me tell you, injuries will strike. It's not a matter of if, but when. So, who are these non-prospect Marlies that could make a push for NHL work in 2026 to 27? Let's break it down, because this is where things get really interesting. First off, let's talk about Marshall Rifai. Personally, I think Rifai is the kind of player coaches love. He's reliable, he's a shot blocker, and he's built for a sheltered bottom pairing role. What makes this really interesting is that in a league where risk is often rewarded, Rifai's style is the opposite. He's the safety net. If Emile Andre is too risky, or if injuries pile up, Rifai could be that steady hand the Leafs need. But here's the thing. His injury history has held him back, and there's no guarantee that John Chayka sees him the same way Brad Treliving did. From my perspective, Rifai is one of those players who could surprise us if given the chance. He's not flashy, but he's effective, and in a league where consistency matters, that could be his ticket. Next up, Villeneuve. Now, Villeneuve is a bit of a wild card. He's got offensive skills, particularly that point shot, but defensively, he's a work in progress. What many people don't realize is that players like Villeneuve often need the right partner and the right situations to thrive. If you take a step back and think about it, the Leafs could use a puck-moving defenseman, especially if injuries hit their top guys. Villeneuve isn't a prospect in the traditional sense, but the organization clearly sees potential in him. This raises a deeper question. How much NHL exposure does he need to iron out those defensive wrinkles? In my opinion, he's someone to keep an eye on, especially if the Leafs find themselves in a pinch. Then there's Brandon Buhr. Honestly, Buhr is a bit of a mystery. He's fresh out of the NCAA, where he was a point-per-game player, and he's got the size and physicality that could make him a late-season call-up option. What this really suggests is that the Leafs might use him as a see-what-we've-got player if things go sideways in 2026 to 27. But here's where it gets fascinating. Buhr is a wild card compared to the AHL veterans, but he's also in that prospect age range. This raises a deeper question. Is he a late bloomer, or just a solid AHL player? Personally, I think he's someone who could surprise us, especially if Chayka sees something in him that others don't. Jacob Quillan is another player who's been on my radar. Last season, he was a bit of a mystery box, but by the end, it was clear he brings speed and hustle to a fourth-line role. What makes this really interesting is that Quillan could be more than just a bubble player. If he spent the summer working on closing those gaps, he could become an everyday NHLer. But even if he doesn't, his speed and energy are valuable in a league that's getting faster every year. From my perspective, Quillan is the kind of player who could become a fan favorite if he gets the right opportunities. Lastly, let's talk about Groulx. For a brief moment, it looked like Groulx could be a solid bottom six option, but his numbers took a hit when he was pushed higher in the lineup. A detail I find fascinating is that his XGF percent and CF percent dropped to around 30%, which isn't going to sit well with a numbers guy like Chayka. But here's the thing. Groulx is still one of the best forward call-up options the Leafs have. What this really suggests is that he's a player who could thrive in the right role, even if it's not as a top six guy. Personally, I think he's someone who could surprise us in training camp, especially if he's compared to players like Steven Lawrence or Teddy Bluger. If you take a step back and think about it, these players represent something bigger, the depth that could make or break the Leafs season. Injuries are inevitable, and having guys like Rifai, Villeneuve, Buhr, Quillan, and Groulx waiting in the wings could be the difference between a successful season and a disappointing one. What this really suggests is that the AHL isn't just a development league, It's a lifeline for NHL teams. And in my opinion, these players are more than just backups. They're opportunities waiting to happen. So what do you think? Could any of these players make a real push for NHL work in 2026 to 27? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more breakdowns like this. Because when it comes to the Leafs and their depth, there's always more to the story than meets the eye.